Picture a coffin that does not sink. Two hollowed planks clasp your body, sealing your chest and belly in wood while your head, arms and legs jut helplessly into the open air. The sky burns above, merciless. A sweetness drips where mercy should be, honey brushed across your lips, your skin, your exposed flesh. At first it feels like kindness, but the gift is a lure. The insects arrive in a low hum, then a chorus. You cannot swat, you cannot flee. You can only breathe and feel the sun grind down upon you. This was no accident of cruelty, but an invention with a name. Scaphism, the boats. A punishment designed not just to kill, but to unmake a person in slow motion, to turn a body into theatre. Why? To show what fear could do when sharpened into policy. Before you watch how the boats worked, you need to know who built them and why rumour alone could govern. The Persian Empire under the Achaemenids stretched like a shadow across continents, its roads binding cities from the Aegean coast to the edge of India. Imagine the reach. Royal messengers could ride from Sardis to Susa in days, carrying the king's will farther than most men would ever travel in a lifetime. Order was not optional. Tribute flowed in. Armies stood ready. Loyalty to the throne was the thread that held this vast fabric together, and a single loose strand threatened the whole weave. To govern such an expanse required more than swords and soldiers. It required spectacle. The king's power had to be seen, not merely whispered. Justice was ritual, and punishment was theatre. When rebellion or betrayal surfaced, the response could not be private. It had to burn into memory. The Persians had laws, taxes, roads, but they also had pageantry, and sometimes that pageantry turned cruel. The Greeks gave this cruelty a name: Scaphism. From the root scaphe, meaning boat, hollowed vessel, or trough. The word is Greek, not Persian, and that detail matters. Outsiders label what they fear, or what they want others to fear. By calling the punishment the boats, they captured both its physical structure and its haunting image. Two planks enclosing a body like a floating sarcophagus. A punishment that drifted between language and legend. Why would an empire so sophisticated, so rich in science, art and architecture, tolerate something so barbaric? The answer lies in intent. Scaphism was not meant for efficiency. It was not a quick execution, nor even a slow one hidden away in a dungeon. It was designed for the opposite: endurance and exposure. The condemned was forced to linger in plain view, turned into a living warning. The body became a billboard, a grotesque signpost declaring the cost of defiance. Fear, theatre, memory. These were the three pillars of its purpose. Fear, because nothing terrifies like imagining oneself in that coffin of wood, smothered in honey, baked by the sun, gnawed by flies. Theatre, because cruelty in private does not rule cruelty performed in public engraves obedience deeper than any edict. Memory, because long after the body is gone, the story remains, whispered by travellers, repeated by enemies, magnified by generations who never saw it firsthand. This is how an empire governs without needing to be everywhere at once. A soldier on the far frontier does not need to see the king's face, only to hear what fate awaits the disloyal. A farmer in Anatolia need not witness the boats himself. The rumour alone carries the weight of law. Legends are loud. Silence can be louder. And yet, the record of Scaphism is thin. Too thin for comfort. Persian sources are silent, leaving us with Greek chroniclers, outsiders who often painted Persia as decadent and monstrous. So, why does this one story refuse to die? Why does the image of the floating coffin persist, when so many other punishments have faded into obscurity? Perhaps because of its sheer precision. It is not a vague tale of torture, but a detailed account, every step described, every horror stretched across time. The very specificity makes it linger. One story, one punishment, one unforgettable image. The Greeks claimed it happened during a clash of kings, when loyalty and legend collided. A boast was made, a king was challenged, and the answer, they say, floated. The empire was already trembling when the story began. Artaxerxes II, ruler of Persia, faced not just foreign enemies but betrayal within his own family. His younger brother, Cyrus the Younger, sought the throne, gathering mercenaries and loyalists to challenge the crown. Their conflict came to a head at Cunaxa in 401 BCE, a battle of brothers where empire itself seemed at stake. The fighting was chaotic. dust thickening the air, bronze flashing in the sunday, Cyrus pushed forward with reckless fury, desperate to strike the decisive blow. Then, in a swirl of clashing bodies, he was cut down. Victory belonged to Artaxerxes, the crown secured by blood. Yet in the aftermath, a dangerous problem surfaced. One of Artaxerxes' own soldiers, Mithridates, sometimes called Mithrates, boasted that he had struck the fatal wound. To most men, such a claim would be glory. But in Persia, it was peril. If a mere soldier killed Cyrus, then the myth of royal invincibility cracked. The king's triumph would no longer shine as divine destiny, but as chance delivered by another's hand. For Artaxerxes, whose power rested as much on perception as on steel, this was intolerable. The boast had to be erased, not just denied, but punished in a way that left no room for imitation. So Mithridates was sentenced to Scaphism. The boats. The account comes from Plutarch centuries later, but the detail is chilling. Mithridates was laid into hollowed planks, his body trapped, his face exposed. He was force-fed milk and honey until he could swallow no more, then smeared with the same sticky sweetness across his skin. At first, this must have seemed grotesquely absurd, a punishment painted in sugar. But as the sun rose and the insects descended, the design revealed itself. Flies clustered, stings multiplied, the body swelled, and the slow unmaking began. Plutarch claims Mithridates survived 17 days, 17 dawns and dusks, 17 cycles of heat and chill, 17 torments of thirst and nausea. Time itself became the instrument of execution. Each hour stretched into something unbearable. Death was not swift, nor even steady, it was prolonged, as if to prove that a man could be broken into days. Each moment another stroke of the punishment script. 17 days. That number is what haunts. It makes the story feel less like myth and more like logbook. We are told not simply that he died, but how long it took. You can almost see someone counting, recording, bearing witness to the drawn-out end. Perhaps that is why this case endured when so many others faded. It gave history something to hold on to. Yet already, suspicion creeps in. Why is this the only detailed case? Why do Persian sources remain silent while Greek chroniclers repeat the tale? Could it be exaggeration? Propaganda meant to cast Persia as monstrous in the eyes of enemies? Or did the silence itself prove the punishment's effectiveness? The rumour enough to terrify without official record. Still, the story of Mithridates refused to vanish. Generation after generation retold it, embedding the image deeper into cultural memory. A soldier who spoke too boldly, a king who would not allow myth to fracture, a punishment that lasted not hours, not days, but 17 endless nights. It is easy to dismiss legends as inventions, but this one carries a peculiar weight. Perhaps because it is anchored in a single name, a single act of arrogance, a single punishment too grotesque to forget. A legend is abstract until you slow the machine and watch what each part does. Imagine the device before the man is placed inside it. 2 long planks, shaped like narrow canoes, carved so they can nest together. The wood is rough, yet sanded smooth where it must press against skin. Each plank is hollowed just enough to cradle a torso, leaving grooves for head, arms and legs to protrude. When the halves are joined, the body is trapped in a wooden coffin that floats. Not buried, not burned, not even shackled in iron, but sealed inside timber that seems almost mundane. The procedure begins with force. The condemned is made to swallow great bowls of milk mixed with honey, more than the body can bear. At first, it tastes sweet, comforting even. But the richness soon curdles in the stomach, causing cramps, bloating, violent need. The sweetness turns on itself, fermenting inside, feeding nausea, binding the body to its own undoing. Hunger is not relieved, rather. The prisoner is made dependent on the very substance that will ruin him. Then comes the smearing. Honey, thick and golden, is brushed over the face, the neck, the hands, the feet. It glistens in the sunlight, clinging to hair and skin. What might once have been luxury now becomes a lure. Flies arrive almost instantly, drawn by the scent, crawling into nostrils, lips, ears. Their wings buzz in frantic vibration, and with them come ants, wasps, beetles, each taking their place in the feast. The first hours are a torment of itching and stinging, the mind reeling against sensations it cannot escape. Swelling begins, as welts rise where insects pierce the skin. Heat intensifies the misery. The prisoner lies exposed beneath a merciless sun, the wooden planks absorbing warmth, radiating it back like an oven. The air quivers in heat shimmer, sweat mixing with honey until the body is glazed in sticky salt. As the days stretch, the punishment transforms. Insects do not merely bite, they breed. Eggs laid in the honey-hung crevices hatch into larvae. Small at first, then burrowing, tunneling into soft flesh, seeking moisture where the body weakens. Infection sets in. The odour thickens, sweet rot mingling with sweat and waste. For the victim, each breath is shallow, each hour longer than the last. Night does not bring relief. The sun's blaze is replaced by chill. Skin that blistered in daylight now trembles in the cold, sticky layers hardening into a crust. Mosquitoes emerge, feeding under the cover of darkness, adding their high-pitched whine to the constant drone. The cycle repeats. Day, night, heat, cold, thirst, bloat, infestation. Thirst itself becomes a sharper torment. Fed milk and honey, the victim's body craves water that never comes. The sweetness clogs the mouth, thickens saliva, leaves the throat raw. Even when liquid is swallowed, it does not soothe. It swells the belly, forcing more waste, trapping the body in its own foulness. Every function of life becomes a weapon turned against itself. Time slows in such conditions. Hours blur into a haze of buzzing and burning. The body is not allowed to die quickly, nor even predictably. Instead, death lingers in stages: fever, delirium, collapse, revival. Each time the condemned slips near unconsciousness, caretakers return not to save but to sustain. More milk, more honey, more smearing. The cruelty lies not only in the method but in its maintenance. This was no one-time act, it was a schedule. And all the while, the boats are placed where people can see. Near water, near pathways, where soldiers or villagers or passers-by might witness. The spectacle matters as much as the suffering. Whispers grow, travelling faster than the insects themselves. This is what happens to traitors. This is what happens to the disloyal. The punishment becomes policy, carried in rumour. The design is almost too perfect in its symbolism. A coffin that floats, a body sealed but exposed, sweetness weaponized, nature turned executioner. It is not a dagger in the dark, nor a hanging in the square. It is a theatre of decay, a message written in flesh. The victim becomes less a man than a stage, each insect a player, each hour an act in a performance scripted to last until the body can endure no more. To describe it is to feel it, and to feel it is to understand why this story outlived the empire that birthed it. Because once you imagine yourself there, locked in wood, smothered in honey, hearing the endless drone, you cannot unsee it. The design lingers, whether real or exaggerated, because it captures something deeper than punishment. It captures the dread of being unmade, piece by piece, by time itself. If this reads like a script, who wrote it, and can we trust the author? The story of Scaphism survives in detail, so sharp it feels undeniable. 17 days, bowls of milk and honey, a coffin that floated. Yet for all its precision, the evidence rests on fragile ground. The silence is the first clue. Persian records, so meticulous in accounting tribute, decrees and battles, say nothing. No clay tablet, no inscription, no chronicle from the empire itself. The Achaemenids, who celebrated victories on walls of stone, left not a whisper about the boats. Instead, the voice we hear is Greek. Plutarch, writing centuries later, gave the fullest account. Other Greek and later Byzantine chroniclers echoed him, painting Persia as decadent, cruel, and alien. Their motive is transparent. To portray enemies as monstrous is to justify one's own resistance, to elevate one's own culture by comparison. Scaphism may have been fact, or it may have been propaganda sharpened into myth. The silence of Persia and the chorus of outsiders form a troubling dissonance, but silence does not mean absence. Many ancient punishments left few traces. Empires rarely recorded their own cruelties in glowing terms. Executions, after all, were not for posterity. They were for the immediate effect, the local audience, the rumour that followed. Oral stories travelled farther than carved inscriptions. What rulers hid from stone, they ensured spread in whispers. So perhaps Persia's silence is not proof of fabrication but evidence of shame or of strategy. Let the Greeks tell it. Let fear travel for you. Then comes the question of plausibility. Could a man truly survive 17 days in such conditions? Medical logic suggests yes. The body, force-fed liquid calories, could endure for weeks, even as infection advanced. The milk and honey would bloat the stomach, but also sustain, just enough to prolong agony. Insects, drawn to exposed flesh, would infest wounds. Sepsis would creep slowly, fever rising, delirium coming and going. The slow rhythm of death by exposure, dehydration, and systemic infection is not only possible, it is consistent with what physicians now understand. Comparisons help. Crucifixion, the Roman tool of terror, was not an instant death but one stretched across days. Victims suffocated gradually, sometimes lasting for 3 or 4 nights before collapse. Other ancient punishments involved live burial, impalement, or exposure in swamps and cages, each using time, environment, and public gaze to transform the body into warning. In this context, Scaphism does not appear implausible. It is simply another variant in humanity's long tradition of slow performative killing. Still, the detail remains suspect. Why 17? Why bowls of milk and honey rather than gruel or water? The number, precise and haunting, may have been rhetorical, a storyteller's flourish meant to brand itself into memory. The honey, too, may be symbolic, the perversion of sweetness into torment. Or perhaps these details were true, so lurid they demanded repetition, so strange they became unforgettable. Historians walk a narrow ridge between belief and doubt. On one side lies gullibility, accepting every grisly account as fact. On the other side lies skepticism so severe it blinds us to the possibility of real cruelty. The safest ground acknowledges both. Scaphism may have been rare, it may have been exaggerated, it may even have been a one-time experiment in punishment that grew into legend through retelling. Yet whether it happened as described or not, the story functioned as truth, because the mechanics are credible, because the fear they carried worked regardless. A farmer who heard of the boats did not pause to demand Persian tablets or Greek sources. He imagined himself in the planks, buzzing in his ears, honey on his skin. The rumour alone shaped behaviour. The spectacle did not need to be repeated often. It needed only to be believed, and that is the power of a useful lie or a terrible truth. Fact or fable, the effect was identical. Obedience shaped by imagination. The record is blurry. The design is not. Cruelty in Scaphism was not a single act. It was maintenance. Each day, attendants returned to the boats, not to end the suffering, but to sustain it. More milk forced between the lips, more honey brushed across the skin, more adjustments to keep the victim alive and visible. Punishment became a schedule, a rhythm of humiliation and torment, carefully preserved so the body could continue as message. Cruelty here was not an accident of rage, but an institution of order. An audience was always implied. Some witnesses stood near, grimacing at the spectacle. Others only heard of it, retelling in whispers that travelled beyond borders. Each reaction added to the effect. Horror, pity, morbid fascination. A mother warning her son to keep loyalty. A soldier suppressing doubt because he could imagine the coffin. The punishment reached further than geography, carried in imagination. The transformation of the condemned was psychological as much as physical. A man ceased to be a man. He became warning, billboard, omen. His individuality stripped away, his identity dissolved into symbol. Insects consumed his body, rumour consumed his name. Scaphism did not merely destroy a person, it converted him into narrative, into tool, into governance itself. This is the logic of spectacle. When the state chooses to display cruelty rather than conceal it, the suffering is doubled. One layer lies in the victim's body, the other in the minds of the audience. Those who watch are punished too, not with death but with imagination. They leave with pictures burned into thought, rehearsing them in silence, passing them down like inheritance. And what does this reveal of power? That fear governs more efficiently than law. That rumour can rule where armies cannot reach. That a throne is steadier when people police themselves, haunted not by the presence of soldiers but by the memory of boats, honey, and buzzing wings. This is why stories endure long after certainty dissolves. The mechanics of governance depend less on truth than on belief. Cruelty here is mirrored. The prisoner loses his body, but the people lose their illusions. They learn the state will not hesitate to turn man into stage, flesh into theatre. Humiliation becomes policy. Fear becomes glue. The buzzing that follows in imagination is as loud as any decree, and Scaphism's shadow stretches further than its source. Scaphism may be singular in its honey-slick cruelty, but it does not stand alone. Across cultures, across centuries, rulers discovered that the slowest punishments were the most enduring. What mattered was not just the pain inflicted, but the time it took and the audience it reached. Different names, same levers, time, exposure, audience. Consider crucifixion, perfected by the Romans. A victim was nailed or bound to a wooden cross, suspended in plain view. The body stretched under the Sunday death rarely came quickly. It was a long suffocation, the chest straining with each shallow breath, the legs cramping as the body fought to stay upright. Days could pass before collapse. Passers-by saw not just a corpse but a struggle, a human form reduced to symbol. Crucifixion became empire's signature because it combined spectacle with inevitability. The condemned was erased slowly enough for all to watch. Elsewhere, punishment by exposure flourished. In swamps, criminals were tied to stakes, left for insects and stagnant water to finish. In medieval Europe, iron cages suspended from walls held men until crows stripped them clean. In colder climates, victims were abandoned to the night air, freezing by degrees while villagers looked on. Always the same principle. Let nature do what the blade could do faster, because nature is patient and the audience is impressionable. Humiliation was as vital as suffering. To be left in public, half dead, meant to lose dignity before death. Stripped of privacy, the condemned became communal property, their degradation shared by all who witnessed. Scaphism magnified this principle. Honey made the body not just exposed but offered, baited for consumption. Insects did what executioners merely began. The body became an ecosystem, a grotesque theatre where every buzzing wing was both actor and chorus. Literature ensured these spectacles did not vanish with their victims. Crucifixion, recorded in scripture, became an eternal image of empire and faith. Medieval chronicles, eager for moral lessons, preserved tales of cages, wheels, and burning stakes. Even when accuracy faltered, memory sharpened the images. Stories outlived records. Rumour carried punishments further than armies could march. And still, Scaphism remains distinct. Other methods shared its tools: exposure, insects, humiliation, but none combined them with such symbolic precision. A coffin that floats, sweetness turns sour, the victim trapped yet visible, alive yet already claimed by nature. It is this paradox, this inversion of comfort into torment, that secures its place in memory. The boats do not simply kill, they transform. So, Scaphism belongs in a family of punishments, but holds its own title. Crucifixion spread faith. Cages spread terror. Stakes fed birds. But the boats created an image so strange, so grotesquely poetic, that it could not be forgotten even if it were rare, perhaps even if it never truly happened. So what do we do with a story that might be exaggerated and still governs how we think about power? Why does the story endure? Not because of certainty, but because of imagination. Scaphism survives precisely because it hovers between fact and fable, because its details are vivid enough to haunt but uncertain enough to invite retelling. Fear thrives in ambiguity. You do not need proof to imagine yourself in the planks. Honey on your skin, flies gathering in a rising hum. The very doubt strengthens the story, for rumour requires no evidence to govern. Control has always leaned on imagination as much as force. The Achaemenid king, the Roman governor, the medieval lord all knew that spectacle shapes obedience more deeply than decree. Policy becomes performance, and the crowd becomes the final instrument. The victim suffers, yes, but the witnesses complete the punishment. Without them, it is only cruelty. With them, it becomes governance. This is why Scaphism still matters, because every age invents its own version. The forms may change: public execution, replaced by televised trials, cages replaced by viral images, but the principle holds. When punishment is staged for eyes, it does not stop at the condemned. It ripples outward, seizing minds, shaping behaviour, disciplining by imagination. Scaphism is not just a Persian rumour. It is a template for how power works. Return, then, to the first image. A coffin that floats, head, arms and legs exposed to the burning sky, honey where mercy should be. The drone of insects swelling into chorus, hours turning into days. You see the man less as individual and more as symbol, his body erased into message. Then, The image quiets. The buzzing fades. The boats drift into silence. But the story does not end there. It lingers, retold across centuries, reshaped by each culture that needed an emblem of cruelty, a mirror of power. You sit with it now, as others did before, reminded that memory can be as binding as chains, that rumour can rule as effectively as law. If you have followed this descent into history's darkest corner, carry it forward, share it, speak it. Knowledge resists manipulation because it makes us recognise when spectacle is shaping us. The boats may be gone, but their lesson floats still. Some punishments end. Their stories don't.